Hey there, welcome to episode 177 of the Cafe Genius Impresarios audio program. I'm your host, as usual, Dan Hugo. We are recording this on Thursday night, so it's 9, let's call it 10 p.m. It's 9:59, whatever. 10 p.m. on Thursday, July 16th, 2026. We'll publish this episode on Friday morning. As usual, new episodes are normally published on Friday mornings. So we're getting a jump on that for once. That's nice. Today's title and topic, Serendipitous Collisions. If you are familiar with the Downtown Project and Tony Hsieh, or it's not a new term, it's been around for a while, so maybe you heard it elsewhere. But the Downtown Project was something of an experiment around serendipitous collisions, among other things. And it's always a topic of conversation. And I just realized I didn't write a summary, so I'll have to come up with something after the fact. I'll be creative. The serendipitous collision notion was one of the underpinnings of the Downtown Project vision, which was to bring various entrepreneurial characters, personalities, and ideas into a small region, not enclosed, but nearby, proximal, and then let nature take its course, so to speak. People run into each other, they talk to each other, they have conversations, they participate in meetups, co-working, presentations, and so on and so on and so on. And then what might come of it? So that was the basic idea. I think there's been a lot learned since, and I will continue to beat the drum of retrospective for Downtown Project, so that what was learned, and I'll stress this because I invariably run into the, why are you anti? No. It's just pure engineering. There was a thing. It moved from one place to another in time and somewhat in space. But we can learn something from that by looking back at where it started, where it ended up, what transpired, what could have been done better, what can we, what worked and what didn't, and then where do we go next? And the fact that most examinations of any startup community, startup ecosystem, whatever you want to call it, mostly they're compared to other places with similar properties, similar attributes. Here, there's a possibility of looking at a retrospective, looking back in time, but in the same footprint as some of these innovation aspirations are taking place today in the innovation district in downtown Las Vegas, and then by extension, the innovation hub, or whatever they're going to call it, down in, is that an Enterprise? Somewhere along the 215 between UNLV and the Tech Park, I think, is where it's supposed to be. But anyway, so as you look at what can we do with creating a supportive, I don't know if that's the good word to use here, an environment that might breed success, might enable success, what can we do? And so the first thing is, let's compare the greater Vegas area to Provo, Utah, or Silicon Valley, or Austin. But I've been saying this for years at this point. Why don't you compare it to Las Vegas from a couple of years ago? At this point, it's a while ago. It's more than 5 years ago. But there's still people that would have some insights. We can look at actually, what actually transpired, what actually worked, and what actually could have been improved upon, etc. So yeah, I'll have to write a summary. But that's the basic idea. That's what we're talking about today. This is kind of the beginning of a tract of sorts. I'm going to mention the roundtable. But let's get started by reminding maybe a newcomer, if you've never heard any of this before, Cafe Genius, CAFFE, so no accent on the E. Genius, as in brilliant people. The origin story, I'll keep it brief because I repeat it every week. So if you listen to another episode, you'll hear more detail. Cafe Genius was created, I guess, in January of 2022. The notion was it'd be cool if we had a way for people to turn an idea into a presentation, kind of like an open mic, as you would, present some music or poetry or a story or humor, stand-up comedy, right? Open mic night. Like, why couldn't we do that with startup pitches? And so we kicked it off. I think it was 11 days later after we had this conversation at a tech alley on a Saturday morning, 9 a.m., and where some people were complaining that it was too early. Well, maybe you're not ready. But the idea was, ideas don't magically spring out of your mind and in front of people. We have a willing room full of people willing to give or offering their critique, their feedback. The rule was emergency vehicle, production by the street. The one core rule was to not be mean. So constructive criticism. We had time for the time. We had 1 hour, so you got 10 minutes, 5 minutes presentation, 5 minutes of feedback, and then absolutely encouraged to continue the conversation through the day. The event, Tech Alley, was typically 10 a.m., the official start time. So we were kind of doing the early pre-show, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. or maybe even beyond. So great, take all day, have conversations, get some feedback, ponder, etc. So that was the origin story. And then Cafe Genius we started talking about how to have better meetups and some ideas and brainstorming around that. And then we had our first cohort of the Genius Roundtable, which was a look from the perspective of actual entrepreneurs into what was working and what wasn't thus far, and how we might quantify that. Like, so it would be measurable, and then how we would go about measuring and comparing to the downtown project as another example in the same area. So that was the first cohort. I think we had 19 consecutive months of the pitch workout room. We had pitch mingles. We had people practicing their elevator pitches in a noisy conversational environment. Coffee shops are good for that. And then some other ideas. So the Genius Roundtable, though, is probably the more interesting sort of analytical component, a collection of things. Basically, the idea was to kind of be a bottom up, hey, we're actually entrepreneurs. We actually need the ecosystem to be healthy and productive and virile. So not viral. So Cafe Genius was kind of heading in that direction. The name comes from an homage to Cafe Centro, which was a coffee shop in San Francisco in the South Park, literally a park. Grass, trees, picnic tables. It was a nice little spot where startups start, as they used to describe themselves. It was very near South Park. You could find it on a map. It was very near the Pac-Bell ballpark, which would become the AT&T ballpark, which would become the Oracle ballpark. There are some other details there, but Cafe Centro, spelled without the accent and the two F's, so there. And then the Genius Lunch was an event totally ad hoc, like, hey, are you in town? Or, hey, do you want to come by? Where just a quick lunch with whoever's around, and kind of thrown together time for people to catch up and who's doing what, a little gossip, a little status update. So conversational engagement for a lunchtime, and then back to work, because most people that would attend were actually pursuing their startup efforts and whatnot. I got to pause real quick and turn off the air conditioner. I don't know why I forget this all the time. Hold on. Testing. All right, we're back. Sorry about that. I must remember to turn off the air conditioning because it becomes a noise source that has to be filtered differently. So if it comes on and turns off, it's more difficult to filter. Otherwise, it leaves a little noise. Anyway, enough about that. I forget. Here we are. But I did write a summary real quick, so we can start off by so the Cafe Genius program, the Genius Lunches, were every once in a while just a social setting, and it was only lunchtime. And this is one of the things that I think needs some tuning, is the all-day gathering of, I must be in the startup community because I'm at this event all day and with free food. I think it's counterproductive. I've said that before. I'm not going to harp on it today, but it's worth taking a good look at what comes next in the evolution of the environment in the Greater Vegas area as far as the entrepreneurial innovation ecosystem, which is a topic we bring up quite a bit in various episodes of this audio program, I think there's a lot to learn still and a lot to discuss, a lot of conversations to have regarding, what best practices might be and so on. So, and then impresarios with two S's, a less common but still valid spelling, Cafe Genius Impresarios. Ideally, there would be guests in this context to discuss things like, what do you think of how this is working, or what's holding you back, or what's helped you to make some progress and things like this. So it's a time to have conversations with people who are pursuing their entrepreneurial innovation endeavors here in the Greater Vegas area or elsewhere. So there you go. That's a good enough introduction, I think. I mean, geez, we're already 11 minutes in. Let's get to the show notes. Hopefully, wherever you found this audio program, you're able to locate the episode description, which contains those show notes, including a brief summary, which I just wrote, and then a few links, the two usual links, and then two specifically for today's episode. So yeah, let's get to it so we can wrap up another week here in Greater Vegas. The summary, then, if you are at all familiar with the Downtown Project days in lovely downtown Las Vegas, you probably heard the term serendipitous collisions with regard to the people pursuing their startup ideas and others visiting to witness this undertaking, sometimes called City as a Startup. We'll get into that a little bit more. We should revisit that, starting but not ending, in this episode. The links, as usual, the Cafe Genius homepage, cafe with two F's and no accent over the E. That makes it easier to type in for a URL. Genius, Genius, no spaces, cafegenius.org. I will point out that as of this episode, we are kind of deprecating the LinkedIn newsletter. I think we did 5 or 6 issues, and there's really no subscribers. Nobody is taking any actions like leave a comment of some sort to say, hey, I read this. So keeping the notion of Cafe Genius sequestered away on a LinkedIn page and whatnot is only redoubling the need, not the progress yet, the need for an internet accessible presence, a real newsletter that's sent via email to people, not hiding behind a LinkedIn account, needing to log in and so on. So that's got to be a big push coming up. So if you are a subscriber to the Cafe Genius News LinkedIn newsletter, we're moving on up and out of LinkedIn. It's not the best place for these pursuits. A lesson that's learned every week. So may as well finally. And I say this all the time, so I'll leave it there for the moment. I'm your host today, as usual. Profile page linking everything. buymeacoffee.com/Dan Hugo. If you visit that profile page, which is, you don't have to spend any money, don't worry. The freeform profile page makes it easy to include some biographical information, some links to all of my various audio programs, including this one. And don't forget, we also have a corresponding YouTube channel for all of the productions. They basically build transcripts for free automatically. So if for no other reason than that, so if you need to read this episode rather than listening to it, it's a good try anyway. We'll, if we haven't gotten any feedback to the contrary. There are also links to various projects and affiliate links if you do want to support these efforts by not spending money, but by my favorite coffee bean links, some other things that I actually use. But again, no obligation to spend money or to purchase anything in general. There is the Buy Me an Update audio program that was originally hosted exclusively at this profile page for me in the posts section, but nobody goes to Buy Me a Coffee for podcasts. So it is still published there first, hence the name, Buy Me an Update. But it is then published automatically 2 hours later to the usual places: Spotify, Amazon, Apple, YouTube, RSS feed, etc. So there you go. Now, there's an article in Forbes. There were many articles at the time. This one's from November of 2013. But if you look up Downtown Project, Tony Hsieh, Serendipitous Collisions, so this is one such article. You can refresh your memory, or you can learn about it for the very first time if you like. You can probably also look up Holacracy if you want to really shake your head a little bit. But yeah, serendipitous collisions, the idea itself is, again, not new, and it wasn't completely foreign, and it's not even a bad idea, but it may not be sufficient. So that's what we'll touch on today, and that's the nature of the article that I've linked next. And let me grab the full title. The title is a little bit long, so I left it beyond. Okay. The title of the paper is Beyond Collisions, which I have written there, colon, and then the part I replaced with an ellipsis, toward a theory of serendipitous interactions in innovation districts, precincts, and hubs. So that's what they were aiming for with the downtown project and serendipitous collisions. And this is published by Dr. John H. Howard, the Action Institute for Policy Research and Innovation in Australia. Check that out. It's a pretty good read. It's long, and I will admit right now, I'm going to read it a couple more times and kind of go through it and see how I actually want to ponder and maybe discuss some more. So today's episode is kind of an introduction to this topic and to that paper as a starting point. Not an end all and be all. This is not a book report or a paper summary, but I found the ideas as I, one pass through, like, yeah, I think serendipity only takes you so far. So check it out. Now, let's get started. Building communities is a lot. If you are new to this program, allow me to give you the TLDR. I moved from Silicon Valley to Las Vegas in August of 2013 as the downtown project was. And I use this term. I don't know if they would have used this term, but just something that I kind of envision to describe it. Blossoming. Downtown project was blossoming into something that was getting noticed and beginning to take real form. It had already been sort of a work in progress, not unlike the co-work space in downtown Vegas. Oh, and now, actually, to be honest, there's a work in progress. I think they just moved completely to a new building, and it's actually up near where I am, and I'm kind of far from downtown. So the downtown project was blossoming into something that was getting noticed. So it was actually becoming visible, and people were coming to visit and so on. I would accept a position with Intel Corporation in the Maker Innovator Group in January of 2014. So I was in town from August to January, basically looking around, seeing what was going on, talking to a lot of people. So I had some time to do the wandering and to do the meeting and to do the what's up, the reconnoiter. But I also ended up not being around so much due to work travel. So once I took the position with Intel, I was gone a lot, 80% maybe. And I also did not live downtown, so I still live in the same general area that I moved into just about 13 years ago. So interesting to me. I had spent a total of about 13 years in Silicon Valley to that point. From 1993 on, I took a brief respite in Arizona, perfect timing, 2001 to 2005. And then I returned for more punishment in the Valley. I had sort of witnessed the dot-com boom and the way the various parts of Silicon Valley sort of blossomed themselves during that time. Though it is important, maybe critical, to understand that Silicon Valley did not spring up from nothing for the dot-com boom. It wasn't like 1992, oh, what is this? There's an empty field with nothing in it. And then 1993 came along with Al Gore inventing the internets and the tax policies and all that, and suddenly, oh, look, Silicon Valley. So rather, it was more than 100 years prior when all that stuff started to happen, the emergence of a culture of innovation and so on. I talked about this in episode 85, the most of this series of programs, and we're at 177 right now, so that was a while ago. But it basically started with the gold rush, picks and shovels, Leland Stanford, and the whole nine. So you can listen to that episode if you want. Even if you don't listen to it, there's a bunch of links, resources to get some of the story from places like Stanford and some other documentaries and so on. So it didn't just spring up out of nowhere. And it took time, by the way. It didn't just happen. It didn't happen in the gold rush time overnight, and it didn't happen in 1993. It didn't happen in 2008 overnight. All these things emerge over time. That's something that might be lost here in Vegas. So when I relocated to Vegas, I was hearing terms like city as a startup and community building and a lot of community in general. And this was definitely something that was in progress, maybe. Definitely when I first arrived, like I said, it was kind of blossoming, but it was always going to be a work in progress. Because again, you don't just go, ta-da, it takes time. Vegas has a lot going on anyway. Downtown Las Vegas had its own version of a lot going on, whether you were involved with the downtown project or not. So there was stuff happening. And then we had an attractor in Tony Hsieh and the Vegas Tech Fund and the downtown project and all of this mechanism and people drawing other people in to a startup community of sorts. So Tony had been in Silicon Valley at some point. I think he moved to Henderson. And then eventually Zappos moved into the old City Hall building in downtown Las Vegas. So he was familiar with that idea of Silicon Valley. And he was actually in San Francisco, if I'm remembering correctly. So when he moved to Henderson to take on the Zappos plans and all that, and then he moved into downtown, he kind of had this production by street. He had this vision of connecting entrepreneurs and the people that live near each other and making a little community, kind of a family-ish arrangement. So everybody kind of, some people would say, oh, it was a socialist experiment. Not really, no. But I would describe it much more of like living in a smaller college student community where everybody kind of knew each other on campus and so on. Having gone to a small school, Harvey Mudd College, as I did, I was more, I think I saw what was happening and made that connection immediately. So I didn't think it was anything so outlandish, like, oh yeah, you're just bringing people together as if they were attending classes at a small college. And every year you'd have another incoming class and you had the more experienced people, the upper class people and so on. So I kind of made that connection. I don't know if Tony would have. And of course, Tony passed away in 2022. So the late Tony Hsieh. So yeah, there was a lot going on downtown and all the associations with Downtown Project and then everything else. Tony had been in Silicon Valley, like I said, and the city is a startup, the downtown Vegas, the whole thing, no established community nor culture of the type he was aiming for was there already. So they were kind of starting from scratch. As far as I've been able to determine, there was no sort of foundation of entrepreneurial, innovator seeds planted, I guess you could say. And again, Silicon Valley did not just spring up overnight. So you cannot move to a downtown area and say, oh, this is now going to be a startup or city as a startup. These things take time. And Silicon Valley certainly cultivated a culture of innovation over decades, which I talked about in episode 85. So this was a challenge right out of the gate to say to the people at large, downtown is now going to be a place where startups pursue their adventures. And then we'll see what happens, right? So I was merely a spectator of the collisions. I always point this out, so I will right now. I was not a part of the downtown project. I accepted that position with Intel, as I've described in previous episodes. And I mentioned. So I took the position in January, and I started working in early February. I went to my new employee orientation. If you're from Intel, you know that's the NEO. And then, was it the beginning of March, I think, or a week or two into March? So within 7 weeks or so, I was heading off to Ireland. My job involved a lot of traveling. So I accepted the position, and I was traveling quite a bit to participate in product development in lab spaces in Leixlip, Ireland, Toulouse, France, Hillsboro, Oregon. And then I would go to Maker Faire in Queens, New York, in Rome, Italy, San Mateo, California, and then hackathons all over the place. So I was never really around Vegas. When I was in town, I was fascinated by how the people who had relocated to the downtown project area to pursue their startup dreams were coming along, what their progress was. And so I got to know a lot of people pursuing their startups. There was a certain amount of notoriety associated with being the only Intel employee in the state of Nevada at the time. I was the Intel guy, all that, for what that's worth. Tony had established a bit of a presence on the world stage with these lofty goals and like, oh, starting something new in downtown Las Vegas. Who would have thought? To establish this startup community where there was no such thing there prior, so kind of breaking new ground, almost literally. He had found success and investment from Amazon in Zappos, and you can find Jeff Bezos making some comments about his observations of Tony and what he had accomplished to that point and so on. So he had some capital. I want to say it was something like 350 million. I'm digging through the memories at the moment. That's not the important part. But that was the capital he was using to inject into this undertaking. There was the Vegas Tech Fund and some other investment in properties and so on. With this notoriety, what is this person trying to accomplish in downtown Las Vegas of all places? With the notoriety came yet more attraction. So as more and more people were becoming aware of this, more and more people wanted to come and check it out, maybe start a company in downtown Las Vegas and so on. The celebrities and various luminaries in the investment space and maybe some community development and maybe economic development from other places. So it just became a place of like, a curiosity, a place to learn like, what's going on? What can I take from this? Or what conversations can I engage in? And to their credit, to his credit and the Downtown Project organizers and so on, that was an interesting time. There were some interesting people and interesting presentations and so on. So yeah, like I said, Downtown Project had several things that did work and some things that I think could be learning experiences to improve on. So a worth reflection and retrospection eventually. The term serendipitous collisions came up often, where Tony was pursuing the notion that if an area can be packed with smart, creative, and motivated people, they would run into each other, almost literally, strike up conversations, develop ideas, and who knows what might come of this. This is one of the reasons, the justifications for the RTO, the follow-up to the WFH from the pandemic times. Like, oh, now everybody likes to work from home. Well, you're going to have to return to the office because it's those serendipitous collisions that lead to innovation. Yeah, maybe. I have to be honest, my view of this has always been that it was an interesting idea, but not a business plan by any means. So you cannot build the future path on luck. Serendipitous collisions is a part of something, but it's not like this is how we're going to do it. And based on my conversations, I think there was more this is how we're going to do it than actual structured plans. I could be wrong. Somebody might counter that. I did not have my own personal experiences on which to base this assessment, though, other than the conversations I had with people, because I had a job with Intel. I was working and traveling quite a bit. But I did get to know many people around the Downtown Project, entrepreneur population, and the concerns were sounding similar across many of them. They thought there would be more guidance, maybe more mentoring, basically more support than they were receiving when they arrived. It was hey, come to downtown Vegas and pursue your startup dreams. And this is glib, but okay, I'm here. Like, all right, good luck. And then a dusting of the hands. Good luck. And that was the message I was getting when I would have conversations with people. I really thought there'd be a little bit more help. So what I was hearing myself, and maybe others heard these observations, was that without that mentoring, without some structure, a lot of people had ideas they wanted to pursue, but were not necessarily equipped to execute on those ideas. Even with access to capital, which is the number one thing people were talking about in recent years that was needed in the greater Vegas area, like, oh, we need access to capital. Some guidance was still missing, according to a variety of comments I was hearing at the time. So even with funds available from the Vegas Tech Fund or other investors or sources of investment, yeah, I need someone to tell me how to make this happen. And yes, the onus is on individuals to, you shouldn't just dive in. There's some due diligence to be done. That's a discussion for another time, but I kind of feel like there was a presentation that was a little bit bigger and more grandiose than reality on the ground. So I call it the last mile, which is a term often used for logistics, like running power or communication cable, or even delivering packages from connecting a central hub of some sort to end users or customers. So you have one central switching for power or communication, right? Your cable, what do you call it? A cable switch, a switching central office. Same with phone lines when they had wired phones. I think that's the old way. But yeah, you want to get a package delivered from Amazon or UPS or whoever. It comes into a central hub. They put it on the trucks, and the trucks go out to neighborhoods and they bring it to your door. That's the last mile. In this case, it was people who were heading toward the hub. So the last mile was arriving in downtown Las Vegas, in the downtown project, with ideas and maybe some excitement and energy about the possibilities, but without anything paving the road along that last mile. The sense was, and this is from people I spoke to contemporaneously, that they were sort of on their own when they arrived. And that can be a little bit disconcerting. Hang on a second, let me grab a drink of water here. Hang on. All right, so I'm back. I think when I pause, you hear a little break. So it sounds like there's an edit cut or something, but it's just pause and unpause. So there were some missing pieces. Again, my view from many years later, but I've had these views since the time, so contemporaneously and then to now. So for today, let's look at some of the pieces that I believe were missing, maybe left to chance a little bit. I'm going to assume that my simplified assessment that the downtown project provided a foundation of capital access, either directly or by way of collisions and other meetings with external capital sources. So Vegas Tech Fund, but maybe others as well. And some infrastructure like housing and a message to the world, right? Like, oh, downtown project is facilitating startups. You can move to downtown Las Vegas and find a place to live and see what happens. And then the visitors and the proactive events like the Downtown Lowdown and the Downtown Podcast and the Work in Progress co-work space, and even the use of the Gold Spike, which was one of the properties that the Shea Foundation or the Shea entity had acquired. In Gold Spike, they removed all the gaming machines. They turned it into a large co-work and meetup space, which I think is a really cool idea. I think there's allegedly, I recently heard that there might be a buyer for the property and they would put back all the gaming machines. Personally, I think they should have turned it more recently into startup housing, but that's a conversation for another time. But the gaming machines were removed and replaced with just tables and chairs. So you could go there and work, bring your laptop and hang out, free Wi-Fi all day. Nobody would bother you. There were beanbag chairs and even a bed at one point. There would be events in the evenings, during the day. It was open 24 hours, essentially. There was a 24-hour cafe that there were a couple different variations of it, but it was always an interesting spot to grab a snack with fellow startup denizens. Something I noticed early on was the population skew, and I think this was one of those missing pieces to address. The way I would state it was this: if I invite only the entrepreneurs, so the founders, to venture to downtown Las Vegas to pursue their entrepreneurial dreams, who are they going to hire? So I would say, well, if you're in a room and it's all founders, it's all entrepreneurs, hey, who wants to work for me? Everyone in the room is going to say, I'm working on my thing. I don't want to work for you. I'm working for me. The local population, especially downtown, was not really set up for tackling any startup ideas thrown at them, not any, right? So there were bars and restaurants. That was an element of the downtown project, was the, and I can't remember the name of that part, but it was whatever it was. So bars and restaurants that were part of the downtown project, they would receive investment. EAT was one of the more famous investments that pretty much turned out pretty good. The food was very nice. So a success story in the food and beverage area. There were various bars, restaurants, the container park, and so on. So that area, I mean, the service industry and hospitality and all that was okay. But what about the other ideas? What about the technology companies, the logistic companies? What MoveLine, for example? What about the co-work spaces? What about, there was just a host of ideas, but when it came time to hire people, there was a little bit of a challenge. There was no bridge in place to connect UNLV or CSN, the College of Southern Nevada, or other educational outlets. And I know this for a fact because I attempted to establish such a bridge and there was a lot left to chance there, and so there was a gap, and a non-trivial gap, in fact. So it's not really clear how that's been addressed since. So maybe it's still there. Now, there was not zero mentoring. It's not like it was a wasteland of nothing. There was some. It was basically tied to the work in progress co-work space, I think. So there'd be various meetups and presentations and so on there. However, the perception, according to what I was hearing from individuals in general, was that it was just not enough, or it wasn't what they were hoping for, it wasn't what they were led to believe, or what they were expecting, something. There was another gap. That a picture of what to expect was drawn with more of the pixels filled in, if you like. But there was a lot of empty space on arrival. Like, hey, I thought there was going to be more of a detailed picture. The big picture was going to be like, no, here's some crayons. Good luck. I'm being facetious, but this is where a glance at the linked article might be interesting. This is not an episode about that article. I've provided the link because we will talk about it in the future, and hopefully at a Genius Roundtable in a community of practice, perhaps. I got to plug that. So what about the first mile? That's the way I started describing arriving into the greater Vegas area with aspirations of greatness. So I'm going to plug the Genius Roundtable explicitly. So I will say this. One of the things to discuss in the roundtable context to understand and plan around is the way a community similar to the downtown project idea would, first of all, learn from what took place in the Innovation District footprint, but also implement some of the missing pieces. And I haven't been comprehensive, so I just picked two for this episode. Not limited to the talent pool and the guidance already mentioned, but other possibilities. And surely others at the Genius Roundtable would have other ideas. So that's why more is always better in this regard. Surely there will be other vantage points from said people and other insights to bring to that table. The ideas presented in the paper, in the links, the Beyond Collisions, they summarize some of the basic idea that merely dumping people perhaps not entirely prepared for what they are signed up for into a couple of square miles of Las Vegas and wishing them all the best is not necessarily the best way to execute on the big idea. Now, there was some planning, so it wasn't, I'm kind of exaggerating a little bit. There was some planning with the events and the infrastructure I mentioned. The Downtown Lowdown was a nice monthly sync up. They would announce progress in various areas, and it wasn't quite as awful as I'm describing. After the downtown project, it has been awful, to be honest. There's a lot of come to downtown, do your startup, and then nothing behind that. A lot of the infrastructure from downtown project sort of withered or faded away or was shut down explicitly, etc. So there was some planning and so on. But a menu of options and possibilities is the first part of this first mile. Like, when I get there, what should I expect? Where there will also need to be some guideposts and maybe a few crossing guards and traffic cops along the way. These are mentors. These are people to offer guidance to help. Like, I've never gone pitching for funding. What do I do? Watching HBO's Silicon Valley is not good advice. So put more simply, serendipity is not sufficient. A plan and a path are essential. And this is basically the take-home message found in the rights. Oh, found in the rights? No. Found in the rights. No, the insights. The insights. That's probably what I meant, not the rights. The insights of those who claim to be community builders, ecosystem builders, and the like. I say claim to be, because I'm kind of the opinion that these builder labels are thrown around a bit too easily, just like community is. It's really easy to say, oh, we're building a community. Well, I've mentioned this before. If you want to see if you have a real community, stop building. See what happens, right? Let someone else organize it. Let it sort of freewheel for a while. If your community comes together for the free food and you stop offering the free food, do they still come there? Throw up a parking barrier. Oh, you got to pay for parking now. Oh, I'm not going to come there. So how important, how established is the community? But we're getting off track. So I think if you're setting up the conditions, Are you building something? Is there going to be some magic that leads to functional something after that? So I don't know if building is the correct. I think there's a lot weighing on the term building. What if we think about it as enzymes? So building sounds cool, but if we really think about it, what is really happening is an activation energy reduction with an enzymatic enabler. That's your title. I'm an enzymatic enabler for a entrepreneurial innovation ecosystem, or a community of startup people within the ecosystem, perhaps. I think community would be the correct term. Who am I? Who am I to judge? Me. That is, we need to make it easier for people to enter the environment and move. They have to have some mobility within it to try to accomplish what they're trying to without feeling stifled and stuck, or I didn't know what I was getting myself into, and so on. So yeah, you should kind of be expected to be ready for these things. Entrepreneurialism is not a Lego kit that you purchase at the toy store and build, right? There's a little bit more to it than that. Although I do use Legos in various analogies, but you're just getting the raw pieces. You don't have a kit with directions. Maybe some people need that. I don't know. To hit the ground running, perhaps, maybe is the way to look at it. Enable people, if you're going to be doing any of this, enable people to spend their energies on what they're trying to accomplish, not on trying to get to a point where they can approach their idea and try to accomplish it, if that makes sense. The other way I would describe this, again, trying, when you find, and if you're at work at a normal job and you spend a lot of time trying to get work done instead of actually get work done, then maybe something's wrong. So it's kind of similar. The people are part of the process, though, and I think that's what goes missing when you say, I'm building a community. All of the people are building the community. And while community builder or ecosystem builder may not sound too far off from what is going on, if the title is actually community enzyme, for example, we are pointing directly at enabling people to be a part of the process and conduct their own movement with a reduced activation energy. So if you want to view it as helping to enable people to, sort of power a community, an emergence of a community emergence. If you invite people to a meetup and you say, hey, this is a community of people and so on. Yeah, okay, you gave them a time and a place, and you either you got to pay some donation or a ticket or something, or maybe there's sponsored free food or whatever it is. Are they just going to show up again? Are they going to show up without you inviting them? Are they going to take proactive steps to have other meetups? Is this community forming so that it's going to carry on its own and so on? So if you consider yourself a community enzyme, you are reducing the friction, the activation energy, so that the people who make up said community will begin to do these things without you. Something to think about. Tony and his downtown project vision, and I have to stress again, because people would sometimes get confused by this, these are not attacks on Tony. If anything, the downtown project itself is worthy of more scrutiny, more examination to learn from, right? It doesn't matter to judge it. But so judging Tony is not really useful or effective anyway. He's obviously not around to defend himself. The downtown project still sort of exists. There's probably an office somewhere. But at least learning from the people who took part, and again, just like the community stuff, there were people doing things, and actually talking to those people and learning from them, I think has a lot of value. So we'll get there eventually. But the downtown project vision did actually have some of the seeds of an enzymatic approach with the land, the living quarters, being able to live when you got here, find a place to live pretty easily, and that's relative. The access to capital was probably the more important friction reduced or enzymatic energy reduction. The story and the visitors, right, telling celebrities and people with capital to invest, or people that are into economic development, or other similar stories and so on. These are all good pieces, but maybe they did not fit together in the best way. Serendipity gets the idea so far. Some strategy may have taken it farther or further, maybe both. And that's why that paper is interesting. You should definitely look through it, because we're going to talk about it again either next episode or the one after that, depending on what's going on next week. So this is the beginning of this discussion. The linked paper is a part of the continuation. So that means, give it a read, and is probably a community of practice on its own if we can get the roundtable cohort 2 up and running. I keep saying that, but I get no interest. And as I mentioned, relying on LinkedIn for this outreach has been an absolute failure. So the lesson is learned over and over again, but it's time to actually make something happen. The enzyme in this case will help us get out of LinkedIn. It will remain as a sort of after the fact, low priority channel for updates. If somebody wants to, let me see if Cafe Genius is in. Okay. They're saying go to the website instead. The value of the newsletter has been pretty low, to be honest. It's the way it is. Lesson learned. So this is the beginning of this discussion. The linked paper is part of the continuation of the discussion. It's probably a community of practice, as I said. So I think that's something to seriously consider, is what do you do in addition to serendipitous collisions to enable a place city-sized like Vegas? Does it have to be all downtown? Clearly not. There will be other hubs of innovation and connect the educational institutions in the area, other resources that will come online eventually, different academic institutions, and so on and so on. So the terrain, the landscape has changed since the days of the downtown project. It extends beyond there. The city as a startup notion, the return on community. These are all ideas that probably could be reconsidered and re-architected, and see where that goes. But this is reason enough, if you want my opinion, to grab a seat at the Genius Roundtable for the second cohort, if I may say. So I will end today's episode on the notion that you should ponder that. Think about being a part of these ongoing discussions, not from on high, to be honest. I'm really not sure what's going on with some of the well-known people who get a lot of likes and commentary on their LinkedIn posts, but I don't know if that connects to reality every time. So that's my opinion. But you, if you're an entrepreneurial in any way, and I have a larger, more inclusive or more varied, I guess, definition of what entrepreneurialism is. It's not just tech, etc. I like to include small businesses because, especially in the early days of a small business, a coffee shop, bookshop, etc., very similar challenges. Not the same, but there are some cases where everybody can learn from each other. I always tell people, we're meeting in a coffee shop to talk about startups. This coffee shop might be a startup. It may only have been open for a couple of weeks. So some similar challenges can be faced, and there is no real need to have an us and a them. In some cases, I'm looking for capital for this type of pursuit, and the coffee shop is already financed. They're already a tenant. They've already done their tenant improvements. They're already up and running. So that's like a different business model and a different approach and a different timeline. But some of the challenges are very similar. So I think we need to have more of that. But that's where I'll leave it for now. So give the paper a glance, and we'll talk about it more either next week or the following week. And we got to see what's going on here. I think if you are entrepreneurial or innovative or both in the greater Vegas area, I think there is some conversation to be had. Depends on what's going on over the next 3 years with regard to the economic diversification strategy, the continued development and evolution of the fun economy, which is a trademark term, and water. But that's where I'll leave it for today. So thank you for listening as always, and don't be a stranger. Check out the previous episodes. Check out episode 85 if you're interested in one view of how Vegas could itself be better, not being another Silicon Valley, but better at being itself. That was the basis of that episode. Anyway, I could ramble on for another hour, but I will not. It's been nice talking to you as always. Till next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.